I think we are live.
Excellent.
Everybody find a seat. We are live. Not alive. We're live. Not Memorex. Real deal. I want to apologize for my slides when I built them. And I'm sitting right in front of the computer. The black font seemed pretty good to me, but I understand it might be a little bit hard to read from your point of view. I apologize.
Just make it a little bigger.
Next time around, it'll be bigger.
But it's nice.
Yep.
It stands out. It's,
Just too small.
I think it might also be because of the blue.
Yeah. Well, on my screen, when I was sitting in front of it, I'm like, wow, that looks really good. So, we've eaten and we're satisfied according to Devarim 8:10. We will bless Adonai for the good land he's given us. Let's do that. Abba Father, we've eaten and we are satisfied. We thank you for the land in the name of Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.
Amen.
So, I got a couple of things I want to talk about today. First, before we get into the slides, I was taking a look at this. I wanted to just throw out a Midrash and have everyone give your thoughts on this. You know, we've given God spoke to Moses saying, when you take a census of the children of Israel to register them, each one will give atonement for his life to Adonai when you register them, so that there is no plague among them when you register them. Everyone among who's registered is to give this, a half a shekel to the shekel of the set apart, according to the shekel of the set apart place, 20 gerahs being a shekel. The half shekel is a contribution to Adonai. So we're giving in some versions it says a ransom. In others it says you're making atonement for yourself. So I was just kind of curious, how do you feel about your life being worth only a half a shekel?
How do you feel about only having to have a shekel for your life?
Pretty good, but your life's only worth a half. It says to make a ransom for your life.
But think about it. God wants you to be able to give so the poorest to the wealthiest, that everybody can afford to ransom their own life. It's not that your life is worth a half a shekel.
Right?
It's that this is what God says to give.
Very good. Constance, did you have a comment?
He said what I wanted to
No, he didn't. You silly. Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is the proof of the divine inspiration of a flat tax. But also, it is a little disturbing thinking that your life is only worth.
But like Jim said, it's pretty cool that I only have to pay a half shekel.
Because what are you being ransomed from in this instance?
Yeah,
For this tax, not other taxes.
plague.
Right, and why a plague? Why would the plague be coming?
Somebody did something wrong.
This is connected directly to when God told him not to number Israel.
You betcha. You bet it is.
But when you do number Israel, so that the plague don't kill the people, here you can give a ransom, and I won't kill them.
Good. Just curious what everyone thought about that. Yep, what do you got?
half a shekel is worth now to be 60 bucks.
No,
Oh,
no. Maybe the weight of the silver that they're talking about here, but a half a shekel is worth about 35 cents. No, I've got shekels sitting in my house.
Silver temple shekel?
The money that Israel uses for their currency.
Because the half shekel was a silver temple shekel. It
I'm
wasn't-
just telling you, a half a shekel right now is not worth 60 bucks.
But at the time-
The weight of the silver might be. Yeah. What you got?
Don't think of a shekel as being an ounce. It's a weight. But a shekel is a temple shekel was approximately 0.399 ounces.
Right.
Not 1 ounce, like you were thinking, 1 ounce coin. So it's fairly cheap. But yeah, it's a weight.
It is a weight. That's exactly right.
So
What you got?
Silver today,
I would say maybe, and not only maybe it meant like a shekel from all the way back then.
So you think a shekel all the way back then would be worth more than a shekel today?
Yeah.
I agree, because it was heavier, right? More silver involved.
then gold and silver goes up all the time depending on the man.
Yeah, you bet, yeah, exactly right.
If you found one, that went up, it appeared that went up.
Yeah. Yeah, good call. Good comments from both you ladies, thanks. You got anything back there, Cease? Good to go? Let's move on to another thing that I was noticing. So let's talk about this anointing oil, the work of a perfumer. I don't think we have that anymore, do we? Unless it's,
Yeah, they're mostly in government labs.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Government labs or perfumers, or is it Josephine Schmuckatelli that lives 3 doors down that deals with essential oils? Is she a perfumer?
No.
Not unless she makes them herself.
Right? And we know from this, we're not allowed to make the anointing oil. So I wanted to ask you this, did anybody ever studied this out? When they anointed something with oil, what did they do? Go ahead.
Are you talking about like when, say, Samuel anointed David?
So right, we're talking about in Parshat Ki Tisa, when they used the special anointing oil and they anointed all of the utensils inside the most set apart place. What did they do? What did they do when they anointed the Kohen Gadol?
Didn't they coat everything?
What you got?
I was thinking maybe the oil was like, that's a washing oil or stuff, and this is the oil for.
I couldn't hear you, sweetheart.
I was thinking the oil was like the special washing material for the dishes that you did with the special.
Yeah, good point. Just wondering if anybody had ever studied it out, what they did. I mean, you can read about what they did in Talmud and Mishnah and other commentaries, Jewish Encyclopedia, what they thought they did. So let's talk about when they anointed, let's just say, the bronze basin, which is inside there, that the Kohen had to wash their hands and feet. How did they anoint that with oil?
The 4 corners of it? Oh,
Nobody ever studied it out?
no.
And what about when they anointed the priest? How did they do that?
Right here, right thumb, right there.
Well, in this, for this particular thing, yeah,
I never,
they dumped it on his head.
There's a scripture that talks about the oil flowing down around.
Yeah, uh-huh. They just dumped it on his head. And so you see lots of, even churches today will come in and, we're gonna anoint people with oil. They put a little on their thumb and put it on their forehead or something like that.
Well, James, in his does talk about, if you're sick, you come before the elders of the church, and
Uh-huh.
anoint you with oil.
Yep.
I don't think it's the same oil as in the temple because it's
Right.
prohibited.
Right.
but
But
maybe
it,
the way they did it is more, maybe they didn't hold bash.
so also oil penetrates your skin.
Yeah.
So where water might run off, or if you're sitting soaking in it, eventually it'll penetrate, and you can die from it, but oil penetrates your skin, so if there were medicinal things in the oil and you're anointed with it, I mean, it possibly could get in and heal you. I'm not telling you that's the way it is. In my mind, that's right. So Josephine Schmuckatelli, who's the essential oil lady of the neighborhood, maybe she's on, so I don't know. Yep.
Something I found out at one time, they would take prisoners and they would soak them in oil, getting no light for like a long time. And I want to say it was like
Who did
weeks
this?
or a month. It was somewhere in the Middle East. And they would pull them out and they'd be almost translucent
Oh, you
and
bet.
then send them out in the sun.
That's torture. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, wow. So anyway, that's the thing of the oil there. I just wanted to chat about that just a little bit, see if anybody had ever taken the time to study it out. And then, of course, I wanted to make mention, whoever compounds any like it, or whoever puts any of it on a stranger, shall be cut off from his people. What does it mean to be cut off from your people?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Constance.
I guess it's like the family disowns their child.
When a family disowns their child,
Like, say-
have you ever known anybody to do that?
Mhm.
I have, but I'm just curious. Hopefully, I don't even worry about it in your family. It's never gonna happen.
They
So
never miss them.
they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
You mean
Foul.
walk away and never miss us?
Flag on the play. They're saying you got so many kiddos, you wouldn't know one was gone.
Picture y'all in the car, go home.
I know you would. I know you would. So being cut off from your people, especially in a time like this, kind of meant certain death, right?
In the desert.
In the desert, out in the wilderness, slave traders, people that hate you, pretty much meant certain death. So you had to be pretty squared away Marine recon to survive, I'm gonna say. Then I wanted to get you to talk about one more thing. Aharon. I told them to give me all their earrings. I threw it in the fire, and out came this calf. So, wow. So this is what gets me about that. Why didn't Moses not go, wait a minute, what? Why didn't he challenge him on such a blatant lie?
What is the heat?
Because he'd broken the tablets already. And so they could point out that you're not supposed to lie.
That's funny. Go ahead.
There's a new one.
Because he knew he lied, right? So let me ask you this. You tell a lie, and your dad knows you lied. Does he just let it go? Or does he call you on it?
Well, it doesn't challenge me on why do you get.
He doesn't challenge me when I lie. I just threw you under the bus, Constance. I'm just messing with you, sweetie.
I haven't lied since I was 5.
Well, that's good. That's awesome. I wish I could say the same. I lie to myself every day. I look in the mirror and go, man, you are a good-looking guy.
Well, the Bible does say call things as
Right.
they are, or not.
So think about that. Think about the significance of this. They had just done a terrible thing, and automatically, just now they've lost faith. We didn't know where Moses was. I took all their jewelry, I threw it in the fire, and out came this calf. Go ahead, sir.
I don't remember what the underlying Hebrew word is, but I did hear somebody teach on it, whether it's true or not, I don't know. They said he really molded
He really molded it. Yeah.
Well, it says he fashioned it.
He fashioned it. He did it. There's no getting around it.
it. I don't see one popping out of the fire though.
Right.
Unless he couldn't, unless what he meant was, I did it and I just couldn't believe it, and there it was. You know,
I'm sure the molds were in the fire.
Yeah.
Maybe he's trying to tell half truth.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Maybe he is.
from his point of view.
And another thing I find interesting is he's the one that actually made the stupid thing, but notice he still gets to be, he still gets to be the high priest, and his sons after him still get to be the Kohen.
He's anointed forever, no matter what he does until he dies.
Right.
Until God puts him to death.
So there's actually kind of a good message here. What does that tell you?
Just because you screw up, God doesn't necessarily very well.
Man, that's good. You can mess up really, really bad. God still cares about you and can turn your life into something awesome.
Then what about?
Yeah. Right?
They messed up.
They messed up.
And Zappa.
And Korah messed up.
I was gonna say, well, in a strange way, I think for Aaron, once he did that, in some ways, the office of the priesthood, it was his forever. But think about that, a responsibility that is yours no matter what. That responsibility is always on your shoulders. It's a great honor, but everyone knows that some honors are a horrible burden to bear. I mean,
Well, so you're
wonderful blessing.
considering it might be in and of itself a punishment of
I mean,
sorts.
like a double, a blessing and a curse at the same time. Like, what's that?
I had not considered that.
I mean,
Was that pretty
he
good?
was the one, the main spiritual responsible person for Israel for the
Right.
rest of his days.
You know, they had that,
And how many animals does
offering,
he have to personally slaughter?
every day they had to do that offering.
Right.
God never forgot that golden calf. So he
That's
said,
right.
"What words do you have here? Here, tell you what, give me an offering.
I need,
one of you."
yeah, what you got, Constance? You just raised your hand like 5 times and now you don't have anything.
Oh, my.
She probably lost it, that's what she.
Too much talking, she forgot what she's gonna say. I do that all the time, so no worries. Yeah,
The people seem to default to that because that's all they've known up to then is the worship of idols.
yeah,
So it's very easy for them to just go back to this default position.
right, and it was comfortable. I bet it was comfortable, yeah. They were no strangers to worship of idols.
No. They had for like 400 years.
Is there any,
Yes, ma'am.
you don't think there was possibly any satanic influence here?
Maybe there was.
I just mean because of the whole re-emergence of that same image over and over and over.
Of the cat.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
So she was saying, do you think there was some satanic influence
Oh,
because of the reemergence of that image over and over again?
Jeroboam.
Possibly. I definitely don't discount that a bit. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you think that there wasn't, because Moses left, it seems like that they were pretty much left to their own devices, or desires, and it didn't seem like it seemed like they had no one else there to instruct them or keep them on the straight and narrow, it seemed like. But, you find afterwards that they had their elders, they had Aaron, and I guess Joshua was off with halfway with Moses, but it seems strange that no one else would have taken up, and kept them together, from doing that at that time.
So that's a very good point, George. In some cases, I can tell you this, even if, in some cases, not all cases, even if you are a person of authority, if you're not the person of authority, sometimes you are reluctant to act on things. And I've seen that over and over and over again. Many times you'll find, at least in the American military, there's somebody who will step up and say, nah, we're going to do it this way, and I'll take the hit for it if we have another problem. But a lot of times people are reluctant to step up and do that because now if something does go wrong, it's not what this guy said, so I don't want to make the decision and have to deal with the consequences. A lot of times you do have that very issue. So that's a pretty good point. And it happens sometimes too. Wayne and I were talking this past week about several times over the years when we've had Sukkot. And we got everyone out in the camp, and then we have to leave the camp for some reason. And like there would be a time where if it was just him there and he had to leave to go to work or something, whatever the case is, that's when something happened. And nobody knew how to deal with it. Or somebody comes into the camp and tries to start some controversy. One particular event that he made mention of happened down at Lake Murray. Wayne had to leave the camp at some point, and there was this guy that came in and was trying to raise a ruckus and says, "Now you're gonna let me teach this thing right here," and even threatened Messianic over it. And fortunately for us, there's an old friend of ours. We just call him Big John. Big John stood up to him and says, "Nah, buddy, you're gonna leave the camp now." And it's just, but Big John's a former Marine, so you gotta expect. I'm just kidding. But truthfully, and he was reluctant to do it, but he finally did step up and say, "Nah, not gonna have it. You got to go." And the guy did leave. But it seems like when we're having Sukkot or something, and the person who is in charge of it, whatever the case is, has to leave the camp, that's when the attack comes, and that's when it happens. Something stupid happens, and nobody wants to act to try to correct it because it's not my place. I don't know what to do about that. So they don't do anything. So I mean, that is possible too. It's a good point, George. Appreciate you bringing it up. What else? And I can see your wheels turning. Naomi, you got something? No? All right. Yeah, what you got, bud?
I have a side note.
Side note?
Yeah.
Send it.
Shofars
Shofarot.
are not made out of cow horn for the very reason of the golden calf.
Right, sin of the golden calf. That is correct. Yep, what you got?
Well, I was thinking maybe, if you thought what you said, maybe you're not the one to raise up the viewers that other people.
No, so there's another good point too. Herd mentality. If we can get one person to raise up and take charge, then everybody else could possibly fall in behind that person. It's a very good point. So one more thing about the shofar thing and not being able to use it because of the sin of the golden calf. Just keep in mind that is tradition. That is not written in scripture, but that is a tradition. Plus the fact that the specific instructions in the Bible were to make it out of a ram's horn, and a bull is not a ram, right? So, but yeah, it's a good point. Tradition absolutely says, yeah, can't use it. Sin of the golden calf.
I don't think they had cats with big horns back there either.
Yeah, Watusis, man. Watusis come from that part of the world. Okay, so I want to move on. I got a couple of things. We got Passover coming up, so I want to talk about just a couple of things that you should know. This is some theology. This isn't necessarily. This is going to be more back and forth, and you're going to have to make a decision on your own on some of this stuff. One of the things that divides the Messianic community, I bet you if I just open the question up, what's the biggest thing that divides the Messianic community? What you got, Constance?
Ways that you think, and some people think, I guess.
It's very good. Yep.
Whether you have lamb or whatever for the meat on Passover and or services.
That's good. Anybody else? Yep.
The calendar.
Ah, there it is right there. That is it right there. That is the biggest thing that turns Messianics into messy antics.
Messy antics.
Right? So let's talk a little bit about that. But first, how many mitzvot in this Torah portion?
There were a lot.
Well,
Okay, so there were a lot. You did read a lot, but keep in mind, those same mitzvot were listed somewhere else in another Torah portion and counted there. So they weren't necessarily counted in this one. So according to the Rambam, Maimonides, you go with D7. Okay, who else says anything else? Who wants 12? Wes, 12. Anybody got 3? You got 3? All right. 10? Constance? All right, here we go. 3 or 7?
7.
Whoops. 7.
Yes.
We'll talk about what they are. So this was the first verse that we read. Let's keep going here. The first one is the Torah of the census. The second one is the ritual cleansing of the Kohen. Prepare of the anointing oil. Do not anoint anyone except the Kohen with the oil of anointment. Do not reproduce the oil of anointment. Do not make incense like the incense of the sanctuary. And do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. So I'm going to just do this one last time, and the answers will pop up, but I'd like to hear you guys tell me, all right? What are the 3 types of mitzvah? I've gone over this 100 times if I've done it
One's
once.
with an explanation, one's without an explanation.
Edot? Did you say Sukkot?
No.
It does.
Edot is one of them, yep. Chukot? Yeah, man, she's on it. Edot,
No, it's not.
Chukim, and
Mitzvah.
Mishpatim.
Mitzvah. It is mitzvah. Oh.
One's with an explanation, one's without an explanation, and ones that are obvious.
Right? So what are the rules of Edot?
I don't know which one's which.
Obvious.
100 times if I've done it once.
So why do it another time?
All right, go. Why ever
Make
do
it
this again?
101.
The rules for adult are always stated. What are the rules of mishpatim?
Obvious.
Always obvious. Very good. And so, what are the rules of chukim?
Not
Neither
explained.
stated nor obvious.
Neither stated nor obvious. Very good.
Just because he said
I
so.
remember the English parts of it, but I just can never remember.
I know, right? Because you don't think about this every day. I know, but it's still fun to chastise you just a little bit. What's the difference between a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah? Constance. What's the difference between a positive commandment and a negative commandment?
Or not to do it.
He's trying to get finished.
You guys are good? You got it?
Well, mine is, I guess, more stated. And the other
So, positive commandment is you will do this, or you will do that, or you shall do it. So we can't think of negative and positive as good and bad like we normally do in our society, right? So a positive mitzvah is you shall do this.
Or as Yoda said, do or do not.
Right, exactly. And a negative mitzvah says do not do this, or you shall not do that. Okay?
negatives
If you're in doubt, look for the sign that has a plus and the sign that has a minus.
Yeah, there you go.
So does it mean two shall nots shall be a shall?
Yes?
Oh, good, good.
That's checking. You never know.
We're going to take away your phone for a week.
You can have it.
Any questions about mitzvot? All right, so if there's no questions, when you take a census of the people of Israel and register them, each upon registration is to pay a ransom for his life to Adonai to avoid any breakout of plague among them during the census. What do you got?
Positive.
Yep. It's a positive mitzvah, right? Okay, so you know the rules then. Why is it positive?
Because you shall.
you shall do this.
Right? You will pay the ransom, right? So, what type of mitzvah is it?
Don't, because it's stated the reason why.
You do.
Mishpatim.
Mishpatim.
Why is it a mishpatim?
It's stated the reason. So you won't complain.
Because it's obvious.
What are the rules?
It don't is, the reasons are stated, and the reasons are stated,
What is the reason?
so you don't get a plague.
It is an adult. Why? Because the reason is clearly stated. You guys? Okay, I know, right? You are not to boil a young goat in its mother's milk.
Negative.
Positive or negative? Yep, negative mitzvah.
Do not.
Very good,
The negatives don't make positive.
Oh,
Positive and negatives don't make negative.
very good. What type of commandment is it?
The goat.
Bukim.
no,
Oh,
Kukin, because
Mishpatim.
You're just.
because it doesn't give an explanation, and there's,
It is hukim. Why?
it's not obvious, and there's
Not
no
obvious.
explanation.
The reason is neither stated nor obvious.
I do believe at the time it was obvious.
We have no evidence of that.
Well, no, because I have had friends who,
Who were there?
no.
Because you're really old.
Who are a whole part of the, they're trying to get as far away from Christianity and everything else that they can.
Yep.
So they've gone and studied everything they could about the old ways. And the reason for doing that was it was worship of another, of a nature god of some sort.
Never read that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
In fact, today it's a Lebanese delicacy. And even in Tel Aviv, there is a restaurant which serves that.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful, it's not-
In Tel Aviv.
It's considered to be a Lebanese delicacy.
Wow, it's interesting.
They don't know the history of it.
Yeah. What you got, Constance?
I was saying, I forgot it was really not, it was very cool.
This was very cruel.
Well, I mean, boiling and keeping it from the milk, I mean, it's really cruel.
Does seem like it, doesn't it?
God, and, God, doesn't involve any using it.
It specifically mentions a kid, and as long as you don't kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I agree with you. Cruel. So in that way, maybe it is obvious because it's cruel.
The other factors.
All right, so I'm done with teasing you guys with that. So let's talk about the calendar.
Sure.
Nothing in this study is meant to split the community for any reason whatsoever. You make up your own mind. I recently heard, that at least most of us here in this congregation, I don't know anybody who thinks otherwise, but for example, when we sight the moon, we are looking for that tiny little sliver of the new moon. And that's the only way you can know when it is because you can see it, right? We look for it. And we know from history that that's what they did in ancient times. And you were even allowed to break the Sabbath by riding long distances on horses to go see it, or camels or whatever to go find it. And then you were tested on what you saw when you got back to the Sanhedrin or to the leaders at the time. So that's how we do it. But I know someone who has been a part of this congregation who believes that the new moon is the dark moon. And, say again? The dark moon. It's the new moon is when you can't see it. When it wanes all the way out and you can't see it. That's the new moon to, yep, what you got?
What's that? Why would they say what you scouts up to see nothing?
That's a very good point. Beautiful. So, but let me just tell you now, there's a teaching that if you sit down and you listen to it, and you go, that really does kind of make sense. And I'll just give you a tiny piece of it. What the guy said to me, or actually in this case, it was a lady that was part of our congregation. I definitely don't want to call her out or say what her name is or anything, but the point was that if you go back all the way to creation, in the beginning, or Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then the next thing is, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And then after that, it says, God said, let there be light. So, creation started in darkness, and then light came. Next thing, when we start a new day, this person says, day falls at evening when it's dark. That's the beginning of the day. It's dark, and then the light comes. So that's their at least part of their argument, that it doesn't match up with the rest of history because everything starts in darkness and then the light comes.
Yes.
Say again.
To me, that's invalid just for the fact that a new day does not start at darkness, it starts at sunset.
Starts at evening.
There's
That's
still
exactly
30
right.
minutes of sunlight, or not sunlight, but light.
Agreed. Yeah, it's invalid. What do you got, sweetie?
I would say, it clearly says the new moon, and it would be, I guess, I mean, it's a statement, they wouldn't say, if they wouldn't say, no moon, they'd say no moon. And
That's very good. Yeah. How can you cite no moon, right? And in some cases, you can't even see the new moon because it's too cloudy, right?
that's why they said,
Yeah, that's why they sent people all over the place to see it. What you got?
Their argument seems rather esoteric, but it only specifically seems to attach to days, not the moon.
Right. And like I said, that's just part of it. I'm just telling you that. So calendar issues seem to be a problem. So I want you to just,
I'm more of the opinion of, what's the big deal? We're just trying to do what it says. It doesn't have to be that specific.
right?
Most of the Bible is all about least common denominator, the simple thing, not trying to make something big and,
Exactly.
which is where the weird name of Yeshua, the names group,
Yeah, the sacred name group.
yeah, it's like, where did they get that from? Because that isn't the Hebrew word,
People that
doesn't mean anything.
people that don't speak Hebrew interpreting Hebrew. I got you. Yeah, I got you. It's no problem. So the reason for the controversies is the vagueness of Bereshit 1:14, and almost every calendar system claims this as the basis. I'm going to read that to you. 1:14, not chapter 11,
Thanks.
chapter 1. What you got, brother?
I was gonna say that, for 2 millennia, we have followed the same calendar that the Jewish people before the Messiah was born followed, and they continued to follow after the Messiah was born. And it was the same calendar that the Messiah followed. So why do they want to branch out into something the Messiah wasn't even into?
Right. That's a good question.
That way we're all on the same sheet.
Bereshit 1:14 says, and Elohim said, let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times and for days and for years. So that is, if you read that on its own, it is kind of vague. So let's see what else we got. This is something that we're going to talk about, intercalate. I want you to know about intercalate. Who knows what intercalate means? It's right up here on the screen. Once again,
Looks like it says to add.
to insert a day, or insert a month or a year, right? A day or a month, etc. To insert something in, that's intercalate. So in the Mishnah Sanhedrin 1:2 says the decision to intercalate the month. We're talking about a leap year now, a Jewish leap year. The decision to intercalate the month is before 3. So they had to have at least 3 people say, yep, it's time to intercalate. And so Rabbi Meir says, the decision to intercalate the year is before 3. And then Rabban Simeon Gamaliel says, with 3 do they begin, with 5 they debate the matter until they reach a final decision, with 7. So more judges. So you can tell that adding a leap year at least is a big deal in this. But if they reach a decision to intercalate the year with 3, the year is intercalated. So it doesn't matter how many judges you got. If you got 3 judges that say it's time to do it, it's time to do it. That's what they said. These are the 3 signs. On account of these 3 signs, do they intercalate the year? Because of the premature state of the grain, because of the condition of the produce of the trees, that's the fruit, and because of the lateness of the spring equinox. Okay, on account of any 2 of these, if 2 of those 3 conditions exist, they'll intercalate the year. But on account of only 1 of them, they will not intercalate the year. So for example, if the fruit of the trees is already ripe, they're not going to do it. It takes that plus the late spring equinox or the grain to be premature, right? And the premature state of the grain was one of them. If that was one of the 2 reasons to intercalate, they would rejoice over that. Okay. And Gamaliel says again, also on account of the lateness of the spring equinox. So they intercalate the year only if the spring equinox is distant by the better part of a month. And how much is the better part of a month? 16 days, says one of them. Rabbi Judah said 2/3 of a month, which is 20 days. No part of tabernacles will come into the fall. So that means if the spring equinox is delayed by at least 20 days, and if you look forward to where Sukkot's supposed to be, if no part of Sukkot will be held will be in the fall, then it is time to intercalate, right? So it's kind of a big deal. Rabbi Yossi says they make a reckoning of the year before Passover. There are still lacking 16 days of the equinox. They intercalate another month. And that's from Bavli Sanhedrin. So here's the secret of the calendar, and this is from the Jewish Encyclopedia. Whenever it becomes apparent that the winter will last until the 16th of Nisan, make the year a leap year without hesitation. Okay? The Mentonic Cycle. Anybody ever heard of Greek astronomer Meton? So he introduced this formula around 432 BCE, but it is possible that it was around before he introduced it. By the 4th century, it was definitely known in Babylon. 19 tropical or solar years are almost equal to 235 synodic or lunar months. So 19 years are almost equal to 235 lunar months. So here's a question, and you can guess on this. What is the difference between 19 years and 235 lunar months?
They're not equal.
Think they're about equal?
That's what he said.
15 days?
16 days? You're not gonna believe this? 2 hours. 2 hours difference,
That's interesting.
right? So this means to keep the 12-month lunar cycle in pace with the solar year, a 13th month is added 7 times during a 19-year cycle. 19-year period. In the Hillel calendar, leap years are on the 3rd year, the 6th year, the 11th, the 14th, 17th, and 19th of that Mentonic cycle. Those 7 times during the 19-year period, okay? In the leap years, a 30-day month called Adar 1. Here's a big misunderstanding, Adar 1 and Adar 2. In a leap year, you're going to insert a 30-day month called Adar 1, and it's after the month of Shavat, and then the regular 29-day month that we would normally have becomes Adar 2. So Adar, the normal Adar that's supposed to be there doesn't get to keep its name. It's just not Adar, it becomes Adar 2. Okay? So it's not 2 that's added, it's 1 that's added. So determine whether a leap year is a leap year. You find the remainder when dividing the Jewish year by the number 19. Okay, so here's some math. If the remainder is 0, 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, or 17, the year is a leap year. So for example, if you do the math and say, all right, it's Jewish year, la la la, divided by 19, we get 273 with a remainder of 2. Is that a leap year? 273 remainder of 8. Is that a leap year? So, right. Okay, good. So, let's try this. Counting from Yom Teruah that we just had, Rosh Hashanah 2020, what year is it now?
Wait a minute, you said a Jewish year. So you're looking at 5775, 5778, I know. What is it?
Right. That's exactly what I'm asking you. What Jewish year is it right now?
I have no idea.
Second?
78?
Nope.
5778,
Nope.
80?
Well, so the question,
5781
Okay.
right now. Oh, she was going to go look at the door, weren't you? Because it's posted right on the door, right outside of this room. So, let's do the math. 5781. What number do we divide by?
19.
Divided by 19, what's the answer? You don't have to round on this. Whatever the remainder is. What is 5781 divided by 19? 11. Anybody doing it on your phone?
Yeah, 304,
Remainder,
2.
Not a,
So it would be.
304 with a remainder of 2.
Yeah,
not a leap year.
Leap year or not?
no,
Not a leap year. No. And there's why. So this is not a leap year, and it's not, right? We got Passover coming up in about 3 weeks. And because we got Passover coming up in 3 weeks, let's talk about chametz.
that's
Chametz.
leap year.
What is chametz?
Yeast or rising agents.
What is chametz?
Right?
Leavening. Yeah, very good. Leavening. There can be no rising. During Passover, you can't get out of your chair because you have just risen, and it is chametz. Right?
Don't worry, I can't anyway.
And this is the verse about not having yeast in your homes. I'm going to read this, Shemot 12:15. There's several that we could have gone through on this, but I only put this one. Believe me, there's about 10 witnesses that we can find on this. Shemot 12:15 says this: 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being shall be cut off from Israel. And what did we say being cut off means?
Kicked out.
Certain death, right? Because you're kicked out. Like Constance says, like a kid being disowned by their parents. So here's some points of contention with chametz. Once again, this is not considered to divide anybody. You decide what's right for you in your house. And I don't care what you eat during Passover. All I know is what I'm going to eat during Passover. Okay? Chametz versus chometz yain. Chametz versus chometz yain. That's one point. The second point is baking soda and baking powder. Knityot. What is knityot? Kitnyot is what it is. Kitnyot. Anybody know what it is? We're going to go over what it is. You'll see. Cheese and yogurt is contested. Hydrolyzed yeast and hydrolyzed yeast extracts are points of contention. So, what types of grain can be made into chametz?
Wheat,
Wheat,
barley,
barley,
Pretty much any type of grain can actually be used to make chametz.
any type of grain can be used to make chametz. Okay, wheat, spelt, barley, oats, rye, and millet was added by some Karaites. That's pretty much the
stretching it.
the main accepted 6 right there. Okay, so let's talk about it. What is the test to see if these grains can be made into chametz?
Leave them out.
Leave them out. Pour some grains
No,
out.
you make it, I think you make the
You
dough.
take flour,
You
you add,
set it
you
out.
add water to it,
And then what happens?
It's supposed to,
and if it starts bubbling after a couple of
If
days.
it's well,
If it's mixed with water, do they leaven or do they spoil? Right? Spoil could be fermenting, right? So yeah, everybody's got a good handle on that. So some Karaites argue also that chametz is fermentation and not only refers to the leavening of grains, but any fermentation or souring process. This is one of the arguments, points of contention, that you may or may not want to adopt. I personally don't. We'll talk about why. So based on this reason, they forbid anything fermented, including wine, all milk products such as yogurt and cheese, and even some lentils, beans, and rice are on those forbidden items. Yes, I saw her hand first.
That's a common disease.
Sounds more like a vegan diet. What you got, Ben?
Actually, if I remember right, in
It's pretty witty.
Torah, it actually mentions that during, I don't know if it was Passover, but wine was mentioned on more than one occasion. That means they had fermented wines.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So the Karaite view points out in biblical Hebrew that vinegar is called chometz yain, which means leavened wine or soured wine. That's vinegar, okay? Nehemiah Gordon says forbidding wine is somewhat surprising given that vinegar is called leavened wine. And we all know that we have kosher for Passover wine, right?
yep.
So we'll keep going. So it implies the difference between wine and vinegar is leavened, but wine is not. Interesting, right? Silly.
Yeah.
Anybody want to expound or make a comment besides silly?
Yeah, it's very silly because.
Not, and to some people it's important though, just so you know. So.
Well, with vinegar, it's the same process as wine, it's just a different type of affected yeast that causes it to ferment into vinegar as opposed to wine.
What do you got?
I go back to what Messiah told them when they were talking about something very similar to this. They tied the cumin and the mint, but they forget the things that need to be done. So in other words, they strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. That's why I think it's silly, because they're going down the same road. It's like,
Building a fence around it.
well, not just building a fence, it's like you'll go to that nth degree to do that. But
Right.
your neighbor over here who is starving, you won't go give them a drop of food,
Right.
or you see where I'm going, that's why I
Sure.
think that something like that's silly. If you're disregarding this over here and you're focused on this, you're kind of like off balance.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like going 50 miles east, then building a fence. It's like kind of.
What does Bamidbar 6:3 say in English? Bamidbar 6:3 says this.
He shall separate himself from wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine or vinegar made from similar drink. Neither shall he drink any grape juice nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. So like a,
That's Nazarite.
We're talking about the Nazir here. So we see that he is not allowed to drink chometz yayin, fermented wine,
He's not even allowed to touch grapes or wine or any of it.
or any kind of strong drink. But what the point here is fermented wine. So there is a process to ferment wine, right? And since wine itself is fermented but never referred to as chametz, then chometz while dealing, it's never referred to as chametz and then chometz while dealing with the similar idea of leaven. So it is not in and of itself the same as chametz, right? Wine is not the same as chametz.
Isn't the whole point of the whole thing, it's about the bread, the grain, not about fermented grapes or fermented
Sure.
cranberries, or it's about
Very good point,
the bread.
right?
And it is to actually to eat unleavened bread,
Leavening
the positive them to eat.
and not have any leavening in your homes for 7 days. Leavening is the thing here. So let's talk about this point of contention. Is baking soda a chemical leavening agent actually, so is it forbidden?
Yes.
We just might be Messianics here. I like
in the
that.
same house.
Forbidden.
Leavening.
I can see either point, because it's a chemical agent. If it's not being specifically used in bread, it's not a leavening agent. It can be used in other things without it leavening it,
Sure.
because it does a different reaction in different things.
Well, here, my answer to the question
Only
is,
surprised if it's added to bread.
my answer is, excellent question.
So I can see why it can go either way. As long as you don't use it as a leavening agent, you should be fine, because it's not what it was talking about when it was talking about
Mhm.
chametz, which is yeast specifically for making bread.
Right. So two things come into play. Baking soda didn't exist when this mitzvah was written, and the Navi and the Kohen Gadol are not present today. Those are important things, right? Navi and the Kohen Gadol are not here to tell us, hey. So we have to decide for ourselves whether or not we're going to use them. For the children of Israel, the only leavening agent they would have had would have been yeast, or the grains that they turned into bread, right? Mix it with water, and if you leave it long enough,
Grape skins.
there is a leavening agent. Scott.
Yeah, grape skins have natural yeast on
They would not have known it was yeast, they only knew the action thereof.
They only knew, okay, they wouldn't have known it's yeast, they only knew the action. So in their case, I'm thinking of Rabbi Shushan here saying, there can be no rising, it is chametz.
With that plate, we always make waffles during Passover, but I use meringue, and it makes them, nice and soft.
Nice and soft and fat.
But don't expand it, just,
It's not a leavening agent, right?
Really, it's a lot better than without.
Meringue, isn't that just egg whites? Ugh. Orthodox Judaism considers baking soda kosher for Passover.
Amen.
Just so you can look in the 1, 2, 3, 4th column from the left, the second highlighted word there is baking soda. Orthodox Judaism does consider it kosher. So, Orthodox Judaism also considers baking powder that it can be kosher for Passover. So let's talk about fermented milk and kitniot.
Yuck.
Elijah Ashachti of the 15th century said, but some of the fools in our times who pretend to be wise do not eat anything that ferments based on the verse, no leaven shall you eat, such as fermented milk, yogurt, and fruits soaked in water. They also refrain from eating beans, rice, and any type of seed, and this is because of their foolishness and lack of knowledge.
I agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah.
What you got, Constance?
I said, fruits have water in them, so it doesn't really.
Yeah, fruit is mostly water, right?
Yeah.
Especially the fruits that I like, peaches and grapes. Oh man, I love some peaches. So chametz for the practical Nazarene. So these are some things that are made into flour: peanuts, corn, mustard, buckwheat, rice, potatoes, sunflower, cottonseed, flaxseed, and quinoa. Here's another part of it: if it grows in a pod, soybeans, peas, beans, and rapeseed. The OU, which is the certifying of what's kosher, what's not, right, is not taking a position about the use of quinoa on Passover and believes that the decision should be made locally. So let's talk about these things here. The Shulchan Aruch, what does Shulchan Aruch mean? Shulchan Aruch, anybody know? It's a label for Jewish discourse, but it literally means the set table. The set table. So the Shulchan Aruch identifies non-grain species as off limits for Aspinazis during Pesach, and they include mustard, lentils, and peas. Two primary characteristics that they make it describe kitniot are this: they grow in a pod like a peanut, and two, they can be ground into flour. So you can grind peanut into peanut flour, right? And then you can put water in it, and you got peanut butter, and it's really good. We use it.
Watch the Carver Creek.
Yeah, must have. So these traits are not absolute, and certain exceptions are made, but it's customary to use potatoes and cottonseed oils, except in Jerusalem, even though they're ground into flour. Peanuts were widely used in Russia, even though they embody the characteristics of kitniot. Kitniot is stuff like beans and rice, lentils, peas.
Because those poor Russians, by the time they'd taken everything away from them, peanuts is all that's left.
That's not as big peanut butter when you ground peanuts. Mighty dry.
Am I reading this correctly, that they're taking other things that can be made into flour and saying they're not kosher for Passover,
Yes.
even though we're specifically commanded to eat unleavened bread, which would be made with flour of any type?
Mhm. Yes.
Straining out of that, to swallow that camel, just saying.
Yep.
Or are they taking away the
So, but remember the test. Remember the test that we talked about.
are they taking away the other flour?
No, because remember how is a matzah made? How's a matzah that's K for P made? How do they make it?
Flour, water, oil.
Flour, water, and bake quickly. You have a certain amount of time, and I think it's like 6 minutes. So it has to be watched. If you don't get it in the oven before 6 minutes, it's destroyed. Right? So that's how they make it. So let's talk about hydrolyzed yeast extract, which consists of concentrations of yeast cells that are allowed to die and break up so that the yeast digestive enzymes break their proteins down into simpler compounds. The one thing that hydrolyzed yeast extract does not do is make food rise. It is not capable of making your bread rise into something.
So
Right.
like nutritional yeast.
Yeah, it's basically what it is, right? So you'll have to pray and tell you what Adonai says to do on this. It is not active yeast cultures. It does not make your bread rise, but it does say the word yeast, right? So it's up to you. Hydrolyzed yeast. Also, another widely used food additive. The general method for making that, such as Vegemite or Marmite, is to add a suspension of yeast that triggers a solution hypertonic, which leads to the shriveling up. It triggers autolysis, and the yeast self-destructs. So once again, it can't make your food rise, but it's there, hydrolyzed yeast extract. Also, anybody know what else hydrolyzed yeast extract is used for?
You're too scientific for me.
Beer.
Flavor?
Beer, it's brewer's yeast. So is regular flour kosher for Passover? Rabbinic Judaism says no. If it's one of the 5 grains, wheat, barley, rye, oats, spelt, and sits in water for more than 18 minutes, it becomes chametz, and one may not eat or derive benefit from it on Pesach. It's common practice that before wheat is ground into flour, the wheat kernels are tempered with water for many hours. Therefore, the flour should be treated as chametz. And also, similarly, oats are heat treated to prevent them from becoming rancid. And if this heating is done with wet steam, the oats may become chametz. On the other hand, barley or pearled barley is processed without water, and therefore a standard bag of barley is not considered chametz. However, some barley steeped in water until it begins to sprout. That creates a product known as barley malt, which is also good for beer, and that is definitely chametz.
Very tasty.
My conclusion is this, that These following items can be kosher for Passover or Hag HaMatzah, but you have to decide for yourself. Wine can be kosher for Passover. Vinegar not made from barley. Yogurt and cheese can be kosher for Passover. Baking soda and baking powder can also be kosher. Kitnyot, which is beans, lentils, rice, those kinds of things, that is not chametz. And autolyzed yeast in hydrolyzed yeast extract. And flour from the 5 grains that are without fermentation. Those things can be kosher for Passover. Be very careful. Yes.
I'm trying to figure out how malted barley, which is actually sprouted barley, is chametz.
It ferments
Yeah, but it's not causing.
the same way you said grape leaf, grape skin.
I think we
Yes,
should
but
do
it's
that
actually
next year.
sprouted, which means it's an actual plant at that
Let's
point.
go back and see what the. Yeah. So some barley steeped in water until the barley begins to sprout. This creates a product known as barley malt or malted barley malt, which is definitely chametz. That's according to Passover or to Orthodox Judaism. I'm telling you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it sprouts, it's an actual grain plant at that point, which means it's not producing anything that could cause.
Right. That's why I'm saying you gotta decide for yourself on that. What questions do we have about comments? You gotta start thinking about cleaning your house. It's coming up. Passover's in 3 weeks. What you got?
Well, I was wondering if you could explain what Jesus was doing on the cross when he didn't accept that
Vinegar.
the vinegar wine that they were trying to give him all spoke.
Well, who would want to drink vinegar? I can't explain what he was doing by not taking it, but
They gave him 2 different things, and one of them he refused.
Well, it goes back to the Pesach when he said he would not drink this until he drank it anew with you
Oh,
in
that's
the
good.
kingdom.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's
Well,
possible.
that actually makes
Yeah.
sense.
if it was, I got a funny story to tell you. You guys, some of you might know my daughter Allie. Jim, you remember Allie when she was little, right? You guys remember when the movie The Passion of the Christ came out? It was just such a big worldwide phenomenon, you know? So my daughter was really little. I'm gonna say she probably hadn't started kindergarten yet, but she was probably 3 or 4. And Yeshua was up on the cross and they were, and she said they put that vinegar stuff, try to give it to him while he was up there. And she said, that was really mean. We're like, why, sweetie? What do you mean? She says, because they keep calling him king of the juice, and then they tried to give him that juice, and he didn't want it. Oh, man, that was so awesome. I'll never forget that as long as I live. They call him king of the juice. She's so awesome. Let's get ready for Havdalah, everyone. Let's pray really quick. Adonai, thank you for letting us come and study your word and to talk a little bit about your things so that we can keep your festivals the right way, in a way that's pleasing to you. We thank you. Please let everyone get home safely in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen.